Commander Vex's warning. The emergency broadcast. The transmission crackled across 1,000 star systems, reaching every communication array, every listening post, every military command center in the galaxy. It was not the polished diplomatic message that usually traveled through official channels. This was raw, desperate, and filled with the kind of urgency that made seasoned commanders pause their daily routines to listen. Commander Vex of the Hegemony Third Fleet floated in the command chair of his dying ship, the Sovereign's Pride. Around him, emergency lights cast eerie shadows across the bridge, where his surviving crew worked frantically to keep life support operational. The massive vessel, once the pride of the Hegemony Navy, now drifted powerless through the void, its hull scarred by weapons that should not have existed. Vex's 4 arms moved across the communication console, his scaled hide bearing fresh battle scars. His species, the Korthani, had ruled the galactic military hierarchy for over 3 millennia. They were born warriors, evolved predators with tactical minds that had conquered countless worlds. Yet here he sat, defeated by a species most of the galaxy considered primitive. "This is Commander Vex of the Hegemony Third Fleet," he began, his voice carrying the weight of absolute defeat. "I am transmitting this message to all civilizations within range. What I am about to tell you will challenge everything you believe about warfare, about evolution, and about a species called humanity." The transmission stabilized as his communications officer, Zara, managed to boost the signal. She was young for a Korthani, barely past her first century, and her golden eyes reflected the same shock that had gripped them all. They had entered this system expecting an easy victory. They were leaving it as broken survivors, with a warning that might save the galaxy from making their same mistake. First contact with the humans. Vex continued his broadcast, his memory returning to the beginning of this catastrophe. 47 solar cycles ago, our exploration fleets discovered a small blue world in the Outer Rim territories. The planet Earth, inhabited by bipedal mammals called humans. Our initial surveys were routine. The species showed signs of early space capability, but their technology was crude by our standards. They had barely established colonies on their own moon and neighboring planets. The commander paused, activating a holographic display that showed Earth as it appeared in their first intelligence reports. A beautiful world, certainly, but one that harbored what appeared to be a relatively young civilization. Their cities were small by galactic standards, their weapons primitive, their space vessels little more than metal tubes propelled by chemical reactions. The Galactic Council classified them as a Level 2 civilization, Vex continued. Suitable for observation, possibly future integration into our trade networks, but certainly not a military concern. They were, by all measurements, centuries away from posing any threat to established galactic powers. Zora looked up from her console, remembering those early reports. She had been part of the intelligence division then, analyzing human broadcasts and cultural patterns. The humans seemed chaotic, constantly fighting among themselves, their planet divided into hundreds of separate nations that competed for resources and territory. By Korthani standards, they were disorganized and inefficient. "I was part of the first diplomatic mission to Earth," Vex said, his voice taking on a different tone. "We approached them as we had approached countless other species. We offered them membership in our alliance structure, protection under hegemony law, and access to our technology in exchange for their world's resources and their acknowledgement of our authority." The holographic display shifted to show the meeting that had taken place aboard the hegemony flagship Eternal Dominion. Vex remembered how small the human delegation had appeared next to the towering Korthani diplomats. The humans were led by a woman named Director Sarah Chen, representing something called the United Earth Council. She was tiny even by human standards, with graying hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. The unexpected response. Director Chen listened to our offer with what we interpreted as appropriate respect. Vex continued. But then she did something we had never encountered in 3,000 years of galactic diplomacy. She politely declined. The memory still shocked him. Every species they had ever contacted had eagerly accepted hegemony protection. The benefits were obvious: advanced technology, protection from hostile neighbors, access to galactic trade routes. The alternative was usually conquest and assimilation by force. Most civilizations recognized this reality and chose the peaceful path. She told us that humanity appreciated our offer, but they preferred to develop their own technology and maintain their independence. She suggested a trade agreement instead, offering cultural exchange and scientific cooperation as equals rather than as subjects to protectors. Vex had been amused at the time. The idea that these primitives considered themselves equals to the hegemony was so absurd it was almost charming. He had given them the standard response: accept our protection, or face the consequences of remaining outside our sphere of influence. Director Chen had simply smiled and said they would take their chances. We gave them one full rotation of their planet to reconsider, Vex said. During that time, our intelligence networks reported something unusual. Instead of panicking or desperately preparing for invasion, the humans did something remarkable. They unified. The holographic display showed Earth during those crucial 24 hours. Across the planet, old enemies became allies. Nations that had been suspicious of each other for generations suddenly opened their borders and shared their military secrets. The chaotic, fractured civilization that the Kortheni had observed for months transformed overnight into something entirely different. Within hours, their separate military forces were coordinating joint defense strategies. Their scientists were sharing research across every discipline. Their industrial capabilities were being redirected toward a single goal: preparing to defend their world against us. Zara remembered the intercepted communications from that day. The humans had broadcast on every frequency, translating their coordination efforts into hundreds of languages. But it was not just military preparation. They were sharing art, music, and stories. Children were drawing pictures for soldiers they had never met. Elderly humans were volunteering for dangerous missions. It was as if the entire species had become a single organism overnight. The siege of Earth. We began what we expected to be a simple siege. Vex continued, his voice growing heavier. The Hegemony Third Fleet consisted of 127 vessels, including 12 dreadnoughts. We had conquered entire sectors with smaller forces. Earth had no space-based military installations, no energy shields protecting their planet, no alliance treaties to call for help. The holographic display showed the Kortheni fleet as it had arranged itself around Earth. It was an impressive sight. Massive ships bristling with energy weapons, fighter squadrons that blotted out the stars, troop transports ready to deploy millions of soldiers. Any reasonable civilization would have surrendered immediately. The humans sent us one final message, Vex said. Director Chen appeared on our communication screen, still calm, still smiling. She said, Commander Vex, you are about to learn why humanity has survived every extinction event our planet has thrown at us for millions of years. We adapt, we endure, and we never surrender what we love. At the time, Vex had dismissed her words as the desperate bravado of a doomed species. He had given the order to begin bombardment of Earth's military installations, expecting quick capitulation. The first wave of attacks targeted their largest military bases, their communication satellites, and their primitive space stations. That was when we discovered our first miscalculation, Vex said. The humans had been using their unification time to evacuate their civilian populations and disperse their military assets. When our energy beams struck their bases, we found them empty. When we destroyed their communication satellites, backup systems immediately activated from hidden locations. The human response was unlike anything the Kortheni had encountered. Instead of gathering their forces for a traditional battle, the humans had scattered their assets across the planet. Every major city had become a potential military base. Every civilian structure could conceal weapons or communication equipment. Human innovation under pressure. By the third day of the siege, we realized that humanity was not fighting according to any military doctrine we understood. Vex continued. Their response to our overwhelming technological advantage was not to match our capabilities, but to make our advantages irrelevant. The holographic display showed examples of human innovation during the siege. They had converted civilian manufacturing facilities into weapons production sites overnight. Their scientists had analyzed captured Corthani technology and found ways to replicate key components using Earth materials. Most remarkably, they had begun adapting their own primitive weapons to exploit weaknesses in Corthani ship design. They targeted our vessels with kinetic projectiles accelerated by their chemical rockets. Vex explained. These should have been harmless against our energy shields, but they had calculated the exact frequencies needed to overload our defensive systems. They turned their nuclear weapons, primitive by galactic standards, into targeted electromagnetic pulse devices that could disable our fighters. Zara remembered the growing confusion in the fleet as their technological advantages began to evaporate. Human tactics were chaotic and unpredictable, but they were also devastatingly effective. The humans seemed to learn from every engagement, adapting their strategies faster than the Corthani could counter them. But their greatest weapon was not technological, Vex said. It was psychological. They broadcast their resistance efforts across all frequencies, ensuring that every member of our fleet could see their determination. They showed us families working together to build weapons, children helping their parents dig fortifications, elderly humans volunteering for the most dangerous missions. The humans had turned their apparent weakness into strength. Their emotional connections, which Corthani military doctrine viewed as inefficiency, became the source of their resilience. They fought not just for survival, but for each other, and that made them impossibly difficult to defeat. By the end of the first week, we had lost 15 ships to a species that should not have been able to harm a single fighter, Vex said. By the end of the second week, the human resistance had spread to every continent on their planet, and they were beginning to launch counterattacks against our orbital positions. The commander paused, remembering the moment when he realized that this siege was not going according to any of their projections. The humans were not just surviving. They were adapting to space warfare faster than any species in galactic history. They were studying captured Corthani equipment and reverse engineering advanced technologies in a matter of days rather than decades. The point of no return. 3 weeks into the siege, I made the decision that I now realize sealed our fate, Vex continued. I called for reinforcements and authorized the use of total warfare protocols. If humanity would not surrender, we would demonstrate the full power of the hegemony military. The holographic display showed the arrival of the hegemony Second Fleet, adding another 90 vessels to the siege force. The plan was simple: systematic destruction of Earth's major population centers until the humans accepted defeat. It was a strategy that had worked on dozens of worlds across the galaxy. That decision was the greatest mistake of my military career, Vex said, because it revealed to humanity exactly what kind of enemy they were facing, and it unlocked something in their nature that I still do not fully understand. The human response to the escalation was immediate and total. Instead of despair, the intensified bombardment seemed to trigger a transformation in human society. Their rate of technological advancement accelerated beyond anything the Corthani had thought possible. Their coordination became perfect. Their willingness to sacrifice for each other became absolute. They began launching what they called Project Defiance. Vex continued, using their own space technology. Enhanced with reverse-engineered Corthani components, they started constructing orbital weapon platforms. These were not sophisticated installations by our standards, but they were built and deployed faster than we thought possible. Within days, the humans had established a defensive perimeter around their planet using weapons that combined human engineering with captured Corthani technology. But more importantly, they had begun to fight back in ways that challenged every assumption the Corthani had made about warfare. They turned their entire planet into a weapon, Vex said. Their communication networks became coordination systems for orbital strikes. Their civilian infrastructure became military support structures. Every human became a soldier, every building became a fortress. Every city became a command center. The siege of Earth was no longer a siege. It had become a war unlike any in galactic history, and the Corthini were beginning to realize that they might not win it. As Vex prepared to continue his warning, the lights on his bridge flickered ominously. The Sovereign's pride was dying, but his message had to reach the galaxy. What he was about to reveal about humanity's true nature would change everything. But this was only the beginning, he said, his voice carrying a weight of terrible knowledge. What happened next will haunt the galaxy for generations to come.